It was around 4 a.m. on December 5 when Natalio Conde woke to the sound of men moving through his railroad apartment on Brook Avenue in the Bronx. He was frightened. 92 years old and in fragile health, he knew he was no match for intruders. Then he heard a commotion and saw his brother-in-law, Mario Sanabria, 69, in the doorway. Mr. Sanabria had lived with him for 7 years, looking after his food and medicine in return for room and board. The lights went on. Mr. Conde said he saw a burly man pushing Mr. Sanabria into the room, holding him by the collar. They were close together, no more than a foot apart, he recalled. Mr. Conde pulled the sheet up over his head and lay back, pretending to be asleep. "What's happening?" he heard Mr. Sanabria say in Spanish. Then he heard a shot. "It was like a bomb going off," he said. The men turned out not to be robbers, but New York City police officers from the Elite Emergency Service Unit executing a search warrant. Dressed in tactical uniforms, they had broken down the door without warning and searched the apartment, room to room. A few hours later, the police department's chief of patrol, Terrence A. Monahan, said that Mr. Sanabria, who spoke no English, had confronted 2 of the officers with a machete. Mr. Sanabria refused an order to drop the weapon and came toward them, the chief said. An officer, later identified as Detective Ruben Leon, fatally shot him once in the chest. Mr. Conde said that in the seconds before he took cover, he did not see a machete in his friend's hand. The machete that the police recovered belonged to him, he said, not to Mr. Sanabria. It was a souvenir from the Caribbean and he kept it behind a door in his room. He said he doubted Mr. Sanabria even knew where it was. The family of Mr. Sanabria, who worked for decades at an ice cream factory in the South Bronx, has sharply disputed the police account of his shooting. The police were not looking for Mr. Sanabria, but for his nephew, Miguel Conde. The officers had received information that Mr. Conde Natalio Conde's 38-year-old son had a gun and narcotics in the apartment, the police said. But they found no drugs or weapons, beyond a crumbling stub of a marijuana cigarette and a pocket knife, Miguel Conde said in an interview. Mr. Conde had been taken into custody when he showed up at the building hours after the shooting, but after being questioned for several hours, he was released with a summons for the marijuana and the knife. Now, the deadly raid and the investigation that led the police to the apartment are under scrutiny by the police department and the Bronx District Attorney's Office, and the family plans to sue the city. 5 police officers can't figure out a better way to take down a guy who is 69 years old and all of 5'4" and 160 pounds, other than shooting him the chest, the family's lawyer, Robert Vilenski, said. Something happened in that room. We are going to have to take testimony to find out. Mr. Sanabria's death marks the 3rd time since October a person in the Bronx has been shot and killed by the police inside their buildings in encounters involving a knife or machete. The authorities have yet to make the search warrant public, nor have they identified the judge who issued it.